God did not give us Sabbath to be bored. God gave us Sabbath so we could rest. And from that rest, we can be productive. From that rest, we can worship him better. From that rest, we can have better relationships. It is not a day of boredom. It is a day of life.
Welcome to the Steward Lab Podcast with our parents, James and Amberlee Rich. Join Mom and Dad as they explore how to be good stewards with your time, money, relationships, health, careers, and even your kids, like us. It's all about growing God's kingdom. Come on, let's experiment.
Well, welcome to the Steward Lab Podcast. We're so excited that you're here joining us. Today is our 7th episode, and if you have been listening along, or if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you're here today, and we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to rate and leave a review. It makes a world of difference so people can hear what we're going to be talking about and really experience change, because we truly believe that stewardship is something that we need to embody in every area of our lives. And we're working towards leaning into what biblical stewardship looks like in our modern world.
And with Amberlee letting you know that this is our 7th episode, there's something special about the number 7.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, it's all over the Bible. And one of the things that, in the creation story, that the 7th day, God rested. And I think it's so important for us to remember the Sabbath and to rest and lean into that. So today we're going to be talking all about the Sabbath. When I was growing up, and for the majority of my life, I just thought the Sabbath meant going to church on Sunday. So James, what did Sabbath look like for you for the majority of your life?
So growing up, Sabbath to me, I just thought Sabbath meant Sunday. I can't say that I knew exactly what the word Sabbath meant, other than it was the day you went to church. Like growing up, you get ready, you wash your body the day before. You had to do your Saturday cleanup, and then Sunday you get up, you go to church, you have a big breakfast. At least this is how it was for me. After church, we would typically have somebody come over, either somebody from church, or it would be my grandpa and my grandma. For a while, they were coming every Sunday. We'd have potatoes every Sunday. We'd have some sort of meat and 2 vegetables, sometimes a side salad, and maybe green beans, canned green beans at that. And so that was like our Sabbath tradition, our Sunday tradition. Once that was done, my dad would go in. He would start watching football. My grandpa would be there. I'd go in and watch some with them. My mom would be cleaning up around the house, getting ready for the next day. She had an in-home daycare, and so it was kind of the day of prep for the next day. And that's what I thought Sabbath should be, is you worship. I didn't see it as a rest day. I saw it as a day of corporate worship, and then getting ready for the week to come.
Yeah. And I had similar experience, not with the family part, but like we would go to church. It would be our one time a week that we would go out to eat. It would normally be with friends from church. And then we would go home and we would just prep for the rest of the upcoming week. And so it was like running errands, doing, odd jobs around the house, just hanging out. But there wasn't like this intentional rest. It was just like, this is what we do on Sundays. And, we went to a worship service, but that was what it looked like. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most Americans view what Sabbath is, what it's like. And I really got hit with the thought of like, is this actually what the Bible is saying when we look at the Sabbath in the 10 Commandments? It's the 4th commandment. Like, I just kind of glossed over it, that like it was not a holy day. It wasn't a day that was set apart. It was just a day to check off my Christian boxes and to get things ready for the upcoming week. And it really made me to start thinking about, is this really what God is intending? That this is so important. That's part of the 10 Commandments.
And don't get us wrong. I think corporate worship is great. But like Amberlee said, most Sundays were not super restful. We get home and we're just basically doing our homework, getting ready for anything that we didn't accomplish on Saturday. we're finishing up on Sunday so that Monday we can hit the ground running. And I really think that's what most of our society is. It's running and getting things done so that you can do the next day better. And this whole idea of Sabbath, once you start breaking into it and looking at it, it is not about doing more so that you can get more done. It's about doing less so that from that rest, you can work from that. And that's as we started looking into what Sabbath was and how it can shape and form our family and our life, we started realizing and getting more and more excited about Sabbath. If we miss a Sabbath, because we're out of town or something like that, our kids let us know that they missed it.
Yeah, we feel it. And I think it's really important for us to even just bring up, like, what is Sabbath? We see that in the Ten Commandments. It's the first time that the Sabbath is mentioned in the Bible. But Sabbath traditionally was the seventh day of the week. It was observed from Friday evening to Saturday evening. And that's the Jewish way of doing it.
Typically around the sunrise and the sunset,
Mm-hmm.
the sunset of Friday and the sunset
And
of
that's
Saturday.
still going on for Jewish people around the world, and also some Seventh-day Adventists. And then the normal, like, Christian way of doing it is that it's Sunday. It's like the day of rest and worship. And I think, like we were talking about, it's more on the worship and less on the rest.
Right.
And so overall, Sabbath is a time of rest. And if you look at the Hebrew meaning of Sabbath is Shabbat. And so if you're Jewish, you probably are going to be calling it not Sabbath, but Shabbat. And that comes from the root Hebrew word, which I'm probably going to totally butcher. It's Shin Biet Tav, which means to cease, to end, to rest.
If we go back and we look at our explanation of what Sabbath was for us growing up, would you say that there was a ceasing there or an ending or even resting?
No. And honestly, for the majority of our marriage, we just kept doing what we had always seen and what was typical and normal of a Sunday, that we were not leaning into the rest portion. And I think that's where we come out being exhausted and busy and drained.
Yeah. Americans don't know how to rest.
No, Sundays are typically a day where we're not as restful because we are serving in some capacity. And that normally is not always very restful or relaxing.
Yeah. As we've been going through this, we've heard a lot of people say, well, that's really the kind of an Old Testament thing. Is Sabbath is an Old Testament thing. We don't have to worry about it. Jesus came, he died on the cross, he ascended. And because of that, like, we don't have to worry about rest anymore. Like, we're in the days where we are preparing the harvest. And what would you say to that?
I have a lot of things I could say to that. There's not a single 10 commandment that you're like, oh, now that Jesus is here, it's okay to commit murder or to commit adultery. Like, there's nothing on that list that we're like, okay, now we're free to do that. For me, that alone is very convincing. And then secondly, you can just see all throughout Scripture how often the Sabbath is talked about. And Jesus is practicing the Sabbath, but he's living into it differently than what the religious people, the rule followers, were doing.
Yeah, a lot of times Jesus was healing on the Sabbath.
Yeah, and
doing ministry.
I honestly feel like he needed that time of rest and restoration, so he had the power and the ability to go and do the things that he was called to do.
For some of you out there listening, and I get it, because I had this check when I was like, I'm not doing Sabbath the way that I feel like I should. I had this check of like, pushing this down, pushing it down. This is definitely not something that we're bringing up to shame people or to guilt them into doing something. This is like, we've come out of having a Sabbath for how many years have we been doing this now?
Like 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years. And we have seen a complete shift and change in the dynamic between our relationship with each other, with our family. And we have found such a rich blessing out of practicing the Sabbath in a very non-religious and structured way. It's been very freeing. And so this comes out of us wanting to share how delightful Sabbath is.
Yes, there's just so many thoughts and expectations that we can put on ourselves, and I think it's like that legalism of the Pharisees who were saying to Jesus, like, you're not living into the Sabbath the way that we feel like you're supposed to be doing. And we have freedom in Christ that we can experience the Sabbath in a different way than, maybe like the typical Jewish way people are doing
Yeah.
right now. Like there's freedom there. Like you can have electricity on in your oven during the Sabbath. Like
Yeah.
it can be different days. Like there's freedom there, but it's more about the principle and the heart behind it.
And we'll probably get more into this on another episode because we don't have enough time to dive deep into it. But what is our checklist of things that we can and can't do on Sabbath?
Yeah, so we really kind of have these two questions that we just filter everything we do on the Sabbath through it. And the first one is this life-giving? If it's not life-giving, we don't do it. And then the second thing is this glorifying to God? And if it checks both those boxes, then we say yes.
We live the whole day by those two rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it does bring so much freedom.
It really does.
In the book of Acts alone, the disciples observed the Sabbath 85 times.
Yeah, I think that's huge, like 85 times. And you think about this as on a weekly basis, like that is going in depth. And I think a lot of times we think, well, the Sabbath was just back in the Old Testament, or, it stopped with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've lost.
And Sabbath is mentioned in the Bible 172 times. When you see just in the book of Acts, Sabbath being observed 85 times, Sabbath being mentioned in the Bible 172 times, it being part of the 10 Commandments, we see that, and we see the value that we've received from practicing Sabbath on a regular basis. So what we're going to do is every 7th episode, we have decided that we're going to do an episode on Sabbath because we see how rich this is. And yes, we are financial coaches, but we even see in our clients that begin to develop a Sabbath ritual, a weekly time where they just set aside and they just rest. We see this being so beneficial for their finances.
Yeah, for their finances, for their family, for their relationships. So that way they're not drained. Like if you're living in survival mode, you're going to be spending money that is more out of convenience, out of just sheer like being reactive to life. And so this is a way to be proactive and to live from rest. And I think that is so life-giving and life-changing. And so I'd like to just read Exodus 20, verse 8 through 11. And this is where the Sabbath is talked about. This is in the 10 Commandments. And I'm just going to read this to you because I think a lot of times we kind of just forget about. We feel like those 10 Commandments, like, we got it down. But just listen to this since we've been talking about the Sabbath. So here it is. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock or your sojourner, who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
So just a little bit of context. I think context a lot of times helps us understand why God is saying to do something or not to do something. And it can be really easy for us to look at this and think, well, God just wants us to sit there and do nothing, twiddle our thumbs and be bored. But this comes out of a time where the Israelites came out of Egypt. And this was only about, I think it was like 3 months after they had come out of captivity. And God is giving them, one of the commandments is to rest, dang it, rest. Because their whole identity was built around production and doing. And so they had to have this very strong, do not do anything but what's glorifying to me on this day.
Mhm.
And so it was a hard stop. And I think we're in that time now where we're in captivity to our work.
Yeah.
I truly believe that we're in captivity just like the Israelites were to Egypt. However, we are in captivity to our production, getting things done as a society. And we need this rest. A lot of times you look at the tablets, they have these like monuments, and then it kind of goes through and it does a little short version of all the commandments. And on that, it says like, obey the Sabbath or
Keep it holy.
keep it holy. And it's very short. But when you actually read it in context and you read in the 10 Commandments, it's not this short little tiny list of do not do, do not do, do not do. It actually takes quite a bit of time. The amount of words that God uses to describe the Sabbath and the commandment of the Sabbath in Exodus, it's 30% of the 10 Commandments. So it's not 10%. It's not like equally weighted. It's 30% of all 10 commandments that it takes to describe. And I do believe that this is because the Israelites really needed some parameters around what rest looks like.
Yeah, we need the details. And I also really love how this has a blessing tied to it. It's not like do not commit adultery. There's a blessing tied to this. And I love also that it ends with holy. Like holy means set apart. Like one day a week needs to be set apart. Are we actually doing that? Like setting a day that we can have a guaranteed time of rest and fulfilling not just for our bodies, but for our souls. Like soul rest is different than just vegging on the couch, watching Netflix.
Yeah, leisure and rest are very different. Sabbath has been very transformative for Amberlee and I, and that's why we see this to be such an important topic for us to talk about. 1/7 of all of our episodes are going to be focused on the Sabbath. And you might be thinking, how can they cover Sabbath that often? There's so much to Sabbath. It is so freeing to take a Sabbath that there's so much to talk about. And we're excited to share it with you.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics.
So Amberlee, why don't you just kind of explain to our listeners a little bit of the shift, where that shift came from in terms of the way that we used to Sabbath to the way that we Sabbath now.
There was a culmination of a lot of different things, but one of the biggest shifts for us was we joined a online coaching group, and the whole point of it was how to train your family to be a team on mission. They talked about the Sabbath, and it was the first time I had ever heard someone saying like, how to implement a weekly Sabbath and what that looks like and how it's transformative and how to make that into a family rhythm and how it's like having a holiday every week.
Yeah, it is.
And I was just shocked. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to a Christian school. Like I lived in the Bible Belt. I have never met a single person who had ever done this. It was just such a foreign concept to me. And I was just shocked that, like, how do I not know about this? And this sounds so intriguing and so necessary, especially, when you have a family, it can be so much that you're in survival mode and you're just trying to get it to the next day. And I was needing rest, and I didn't even know what rest looked like and what would be life-giving for me. And it was just eye-opening to see, like, God created something and I haven't been leaning into it. And how can we start doing this as a family?
Even tonight, before we came out to do this podcast, we did our family
meeting.
We did our family meeting where we go through the calendar for the week to come. And you looked at Saturday and you said, we don't have anything on the calendar for Saturday. And our daughter squealed. She's like, oh, I'm so excited about Sabbath. We just do nothing. Oh, it's just glorious. She sometimes talks like an old lady, but our kids just absolutely love Sabbath. And I think the view of Sabbath in the past, even when we would read Little House on the Prairie books, the way that they explain and describe their Sabbath sounds absolutely dreadful. Like they just sit there and do nothing.
Can't smile, can't
smile, can't be loud, can't sing. You can sit and you can sleep. And then they read the Bible. And that's all Sabbath is. God did not give us Sabbath to be bored. God gave us Sabbath so we could rest. And from that rest, we can be productive. From that rest, we can worship him better. From that rest, we can have better relationships. It is not a day of boredom. It is a day of life. And that's why we have just so enjoyed the Sabbath.
So today, I just want to ask you a question for you to reflect on. Are you setting a day aside that is holy, that is set apart, that's different than the rest of the week? Another question to ask yourself too is, am I getting weekly rest? I think a lot of times we're getting rest, maybe on a vacation, or we think we're going to get rest, but then we overdo it. We're exhausted. We come back home and we need another vacation. We need a weekend from our vacation. So are you getting rest? And are you creating a day and setting a day aside that is holy?
They call it practicing the Sabbath because every 7 days you get to try it again. And what worked, what didn't work. Do you feel rested after this Sabbath time? And for some of you, it might be like, I can't just go out and take one full day and not do anything. That's true. Maybe not right now, but in the future you can. But what if you took a little portion of a day? What we're doing is we're challenging you to set a time on your calendar this week and rest. If you've got 2 hours, take 2 hours. If that looks like going on a walk along the green belt, if you're in the Boise area or along a river and you just have nothing on your calendar other than what fills you up and you do that, give that a try this week and see what happens.
And if you have a family, do this with your family. Like, this doesn't need to be something that is like alone time. Maybe it's playing games. Think about the things that you really love and enjoy that are life-giving and do those things. Put it in your calendar that this is your rest time and treat it like a scheduled event, something that you need to show up to.
So that does it for our first of many Sabbath episodes. I hope you enjoyed that. We could talk about this for hours, but we're not going to do that today. We will do that over the course of many, many weeks. And we're excited to talk to you about that more. So just as a reminder, the action step for this episode is to set a time aside in your calendar just simply for rest. And as you start seeing the benefits of rest and how enjoyable it can be, then you can begin to work up to a 24-hour period once a week, and you will see how incredible that is.
Share this episode with someone. This is a great thing to do in community. So if you are married, share it with your spouse, share it with a friend, someone that you could actually have a conversation and talk it through so you can do this together.
That's right. All right. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us.